Well, at 8:27 a.m., we continue with the broadcast this morning. News and views. It is I am Inayat Wadi standing in for Julie Ali this morning. And the big talking point in South Africa has been the cabinet reshuffle that was announced last night, and we are taking reaction. But also at the same time, looking at President Cyril Ramaphosa himself, looking at the Phala Phala scandal. And yesterday we learned about the South African Revenue Service being at odds with regards to the whole question on, whether Cyril Ramaphosa has actually breached the revenue services, both in terms of declaring and also, more importantly, having been taxed on the money that was found in Phala Phala. And we're going across now to be joined by the Honourable Member of Parliament. We are joined by the leader of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, Mr. John Steenhuisen. Mr. Steenhuisen, good morning to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Salam alaikum to you and salam alaikum to the viewers. It's great to be with you this morning.
Yes, walaikum salam. Let's just before we get to Phala Phala and SARS, just I know you've already commented, you've tweeted as well extensively on the cabinet appointments, the reshuffle. Just your thoughts on what Cyril Ramaphosa had said yesterday and the appointments that he had made?
Well, I think it's shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. I think that there was really a missed opportunity to bring some new blood, some new energy and some new dynamism into cabinet. I think a massive missed opportunity to bring in an industry expert with international and local expertise and knowledge about the electricity crisis. And yet we've just got recycled ANC party hacks that have been just simply shuffled around the same table, where they've made the same bad decisions that have ended up in the same bad place that South Africa finds itself in. Astonishing as well, people being retained, someone like the police minister, arguably the worst police minister in post-democratic South Africa, which led directly to a situation where over 80 of our fellow countrymen and women are murdered every single day. And it makes no sense whatsoever that these individuals are kept in the cabinet. And then also the expansion of the cabinet should worry us. In 2019, Mr. Ramaphosa promised us a slimmed down executive. He said there was going to be a process to look at reducing the number of ministries. Well, we've just added 2 new ministries now and 4 ministries in the presidency now in total. And all of this comes at a cost to the fiscus. Each minister comes in on an average of about 40 million rand every single year, the price tag. So we've had 80 million added to our pay, our bill as citizens of the country now, with the addition and expansion of this cabinet.
Yes, and I think the question that I had also raised with the previous guest, Professor Mapunya, and I'd like your thoughts on this. Are these political appointees that he has made, rather than looking at the country at this point in time in terms of what the country desperately needs to get us out of the mess that we find ourselves in? So, is he looking at a long-term solution from a political perspective, eyeing the 2024 elections, rather than focusing on sorting the problems that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think that what you've seen here is the president once again putting party interests ahead of the country interest. Let's look by way of example, the appointment of Sputla Ramakgoba as electricity minister. This is not somebody who's new. He's been around the table during the entire Eskom crisis in the presidency as the person in charge of infrastructure. And yet he's made no impact whatsoever on the crisis. So I think the president was really serious about getting to the bottom of load shedding, about ending load shedding, about getting energy back into our homes, back into the economy, back into the grid. He would have gone outside of Parliament and found somebody with the expertise that would be required to be able to quite quickly turn things around. Instead, we've got somebody who's been around the table already and clearly has made very little impact, because load shedding has got worse during the tenure of President Ramaphosa. It has not got better. And so I do think that you're seeing a short-term political approach rather than putting the interests of the country at heart. But frankly, if I'm completely honest, if this is the team that the president has picked to lead into the 2024 election, which is less than 15 months away, it is a complete gift to the opposition. By retaining ministers who've not performed, by bringing in people who clearly are not going to be able to make an impact, it obviously boosts the opposition's chances come that 2024 election.
Yes, and also just your thoughts, and I know you've been in politics long enough. Just looking at some of the people like, for instance, Gwede Mantashe, Pravin Gordhan, Dr. Dlamini Zuma. Now we know their track record. Dr. Dlamini Zuma during the whole COVID debacle that was playing out. Minister of Minerals and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, Pravin Gordhan. Now, these are people that need to take accountability. They need to take responsibility for the huge mess that we find ourselves in, and retaining these people and keeping them close to him, John.
Yeah, well, I think that the ANC has reached that point where all governments reach eventually, where they've run out of ideas, run out of people, run out of energy. And I think that's clearly reflected in the president's cabinet. I mean, to put a 74-year-old, I'm not being ageist, in charge of the youth in South Africa seems a bit ridiculous. So I think that what we are seeing here is a government that's run out of road, run out of ideas, run out of energy, and has reached a point where it needs to be replaced for any form of renewal to take place. I think that if one looks at Gwede Mantashe, looks at Pravin Gordhan, they've already been around the table. They are the obstacles to energy reform in the country, and they are one of the reasons we're sitting with stage 5, 6 load shedding, with the prospectus that things are going to get worse. Why on earth would you retain dead wood like that and leave them in portfolios where there clearly is going to be a clash with the new electricity minister? Already 2 weeks ago, Mr. Mantashe said this is not a minister, this is a project manager. And what does this mean? Does it mean he's going to have to sit at the kiddies' table when it comes to cabinet? And so already those tensions are there. And the ministers have been the problem. They have been the obstacle. Simply adding more ministers into the mix now is not going to get us out of this crisis, and it's not going to get the lights back on.
Right, let's come to the other issue we'd like to talk about, Phala Phala. We want to talk about SARS. We want to talk about Section 89's panel report. And I know you've commented on that as well. Just your thoughts on SARS and what SARS is actually saying.
Well, I think it's important to take a step back and look at what happened last year when the president finally broke his silence. He tried to put a veneer of respectability on the fact that he had hundreds of thousands of US dollars stuffed into a couch on his farm, and said that this was a normal business transaction and there's nothing to see here. And the individual as well said that he had complied with all of the regulations and the money was lawfully in the country. Clearly, from the Promotion of Access to Information Act result, that money had not been declared at the port of entry, and therefore this was not a legitimate business transaction. The money, the dollars, were in the country unlawfully. And I think this is also backed up by the fact about how the money was handled once it was handed over to Mr. Ramaphosa's operation. If it was a legitimate business transaction, it would have been banked, it would have been converted into rands, and would have reflected in the books of the operation. Instead, this money was moved from a safe in its dollar form, pushed into the couch at the president's farm. This is not the behavior of a legitimate business transaction. It clearly shows that there must have been some knowledge that this money was dirty or illegitimate, and therefore there was a need to treat it differently to the way that you would treat normal cash transactions that took place in the ordinary course of business. So I think it leaves the president in a very difficult position now, because he is legitimately being asked questions now around, well, was this a legit business transaction? Because clearly the way in which the money was brought into the country and the manner in which it was handled by him, and then the fact that it was not reported when it was stolen, clearly points to the fact that there must have been some knowledge that these were dirty dollars.
Yes. Now, I see you've obviously written to SARS, and they have responded to you. And, clearly they've made it clear that it's not possible to provide you access to the records which you have requested. But also in their response to you, they're saying that after reasonable steps were taken to find the record requested in your PAIA application, the record does not exist or cannot be found.
Yes, I mean, I don't think if one looks at the balance of probabilities here, there's no such record because the money was never declared. Mr. Mustafa waved around a form but refused to give journalists a copy of it and refused to let them film it in what he said was his declaration form. Clearly, there was no such declaration, and it's very, very evidenced by the fact that SARS, which, as any taxpayer would know, is very thorough when it comes to administration and documentation, particularly when you owe them money or there's an obligation on your part. So I don't think the record exists. I don't think it ever has existed. And I think this was all part of the tissue of lies that the president built around the Phala Phala matter to try and weasel out of it and escape accountability.
And just finally, where does this actually leave the opposition, people like yourself and other parties who want the president to be brought to book over the Phala Phala scandal? And we've also known that the Constitutional Court last week denied him direct access to challenge the panel's findings.
Well, we've called for an ad hoc committee to be created in Parliament because we believe it's very important that the truth outs on this matter, and that we in the opposition, you in the media, and civil society in general are able to garner what the truth was around this money. This is also important if one gives in context two things that happened last week. The first was the fact that the Constitutional Court sent the president packing in his attempt to try and have direct access. And secondly, the grey listing by the International Task Force. One of their chief concerns was the fact that South Africa does not monitor effectively financial flows that could be the proceeds of organized crime or of international crime in the country. And here we have the very problem being exemplified by none other than the president's conduct in this particular matter, where, you know, this money was not accounted for coming into the country. It was not banked into the system. It wasn't declared to the Reserve Bank. The FICA requirements were not followed. It was very, very clear that it was not entered into the formal banking system. So this leaves us in a situation where we must demand accountability. You can't have one set of laws in a country for citizens and business people and another set of laws for the president and the connected cadres. Equality before the law is a key foundational principle of any democracy. And so we're not going to stop pursuing this, and we'll do it through president's questions. But we believe that Parliament, particularly given the drubbing that it got at the Zondo Commission for its failure to hold the executive accountable, needs to do the right thing in this case and not abuse its majority to shield people from accountability, but to demand accountability from those who are expected to account to Parliament.
Well, John, thank you very much for that, and for taking time out this morning. And we're going to have to leave it at that, but all the best to you. And we appreciate your time with us this morning.
Shukran. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance, with us this morning. A quick break. We'll be back. We've still got a lot more analysis to do on the cabinet reshuffle.